My name is Kolton Lee. I'm the program director at Ravensbourne for Media Works, which covers film and television. I'm really pleased tonight to welcome Mr. Vinay Patel, writer of television, writer of theatre, former Breakthrough Brit winner. We're really pleased to have you here to join us tonight for this Rave Late. Anything you want to say, Vinay?
No, I've got plenty to say, so I think I'll save it for then.
Okay, well then, nice. let's start the slides then.
Cool. Let me see. If I press that, here we go. Hi everyone. Yeah, it's nice to talk to you this evening. My talk today is going to be about everything I've done wrong and how it made me better. This is illustrated with this picture here of me standing on a cliff when I was probably your age. And well, I mean, it didn't turn out too badly because I'm still here. And that's kind of the point of what I'm getting at. I was asked to think of the umbrella of this talk in the sense of creativity as ... And I remember reading that Marianne Elliott, who is a phenomenal theatre director, she referred to rehearsals as getting it wrong until you get it right, which I love because it emphasizes just how much being wrong isn't a negative. It's an important part of the process. So I think for me, creativity is failure. It's mistakes, it's U-turns. And like you, I've had some training in the arts. And while I was doing that, during the interviews or Q&As or talks like this with like all the famous and professional people, it would invariably be about their successes. And I got really frustrated with that because I know about them being good. You know, that's why I know about them. I don't need to hear about that. I can't, in fact, learn anything from that. I wanted to hear from them all the ways they fucked up. And so in the spirit of trying to placate my younger self, I'm going to talk through some ways I fucked up and what I've learned from doing that. Starting with this, starting late. So let me just frame this by talking about what I mean by late. I put on my first play when I was 28 years old, which isn't late within the world, only within an industry that sort of has this fetish for the next bright young thing. But I just wanted to acknowledge that plenty of people get started later, and that's absolutely fine. But in terms of what happened to me, I left university and I didn't quite know where I was going to end up. I did a short course in practical filmmaking because I did an English degree and wanted some sort of practical skills. I'm quite a hands-on person generally, and I liked my tech stuff, so that felt right for me. While there, I was sort of scouring message boards and got jobs running on shorts and music videos, which was useful to a degree. It was also absolutely knackering and effectively unpaid. And I knew I wanted to be in the production world and not just running around, and so I thought I'd use the skills I'd learned, and I went into business as a corporate filmmaker for a few years, doing things like promos and informational shoots, some of which, as this photo attests to, involve some fancy but badly lit green screen. Graduating into a recession of 2008 was pretty tough, and that made me pretty wary of the world, but I'm proud I managed to build that business into something that kept me alive. And sometimes that business had quiet periods, so I took on work as a technician at my old film school, trying to do creative work on the side. And at this point, I think I must have been like 24, and I was living at home, commuting 2 hours each way every day, and eventually realized while I was proximate to the filmmaking world, I wasn't doing any filmmaking or anything creative at all, really. And, I was there for a while, and I'd hit 25. I think I had nothing really to my name. And I was beginning to think that maybe this world and this life wasn't for me. Like, I'm not from a creative family or one that's particularly interested in culture, really. So what was I doing here? But I managed to shake that feeling, and I ended up applying to do a master's in writing, doing my corporate filmmaking gig at night and lunchtimes to keep myself afloat. And I thought that focusing on one aspect, writing in particular, for a little bit would be good for me rather than trying to do it all, because I was at kind of, I guess, sort of the point where you'll be at. I was like, maybe I do want to be a DOP. Maybe I want to be an editor. Maybe I want to be a colorist. I want to do everything. But I was like, just focus on that one thing. And that was also quite draining because of all the running around. But having that time and structure to be creative helped me realize I do belong there. And there were other outlets for my writing, but I still hadn't done anything properly. And after graduating from there, I ended up going back to working full time to make up the debt I'd got into by going on that course. And I got a little bit used to a life where you're not entirely broke or knackered all the time, which was actually quite good for me, because then I started writing on the side again, and I got attached to a theatre company, though nothing was hugely forthcoming from that. And basically I got to 26, 27, and I realized what was holding me back, that I was forever waiting for someone else to validate me, when the truth is, if I never really backed myself, why would anyone else do that? So that line of thought ended up with me diving fully into the world of fringe theatre, which isn't where I thought I would end up or start. I didn't go to the theatre when I was a kid. I lived in one of the two London boroughs. So I grew up in one of the two London boroughs that doesn't have a theatre. But I came to find the community there that of basically a load of broke but energetic young people, and I ended up creating a one-man show that was the purest and cheapest distillation of what I wanted to say and do in the world. And that's the piece that sort of changed everything for me. So what are the lessons from that? I think, firstly, I'd say don't rush to leave your day job when you get one. It's not about being full-time. It's about what setup allows you to live well and make good work. The idea that you're only real as an artist if you're doing it full-time kind of panders to the people who are already wealthy or successful. Secondly, just make stuff. You have to. It can be cheap. It can be just for you, but you have to be generating material in some capacity at the very least, which I know is really hard, but it is truly the difference. And don't wait for someone else to give you the nod. You have to make that work however you can. Thirdly, those early mistakes you make in that work will be astonishing. You forget praise, but you never forget fucking up. And that makes you more deliberate as an artist. And I think if I'd begun sooner, in terms of just generating that work, I'd have had more chance to make more wonderful mistakes. And finally, on that part, though I hadn't produced anything really, it wasn't exactly true I hadn't started. All that experience was really valuable. And having other jobs was useful. It took some of the pressure off of making it, because I knew I had the capacity to do other things. But that wasn't planned, and it was about not having the courage to back my creative voice earlier. Which I try to remember when I'm scared of things. Speaking of being scared of things, the next mistake I made is not finishing things. So an early frequent issue for me was that, I just never got anything done. I'd get really excited about a new project, suspiciously just when an old one was getting really difficult. And partly that was boredom, partly it was losing faith, partly it was a lack of clarity in my creative vision, and partly it was just being lazy. But, whatever the excuse, the end result was still just not seeing those projects through. And there are lots of ways you can convince yourself that not bothering to finish things is fine. It might be you don't have the time. You might be saying, oh, this piece doesn't speak to the moment, or this is the wrong kind of work for me to be making, and I should be doing something more like the thing I watched last night, which was brilliant. And that, happens to me all the time. But ironically, I especially ended up not finishing lots of passion projects because they're very easy to boot down the line when you have to make a living. The thing is, though, those projects more often than not end up being relevant at some point or useful somewhere else down the line. Someone might ask you, do you have anything like this? And you do, sort of, kind of a third of it that's unfinished and forgotten, and you kick yourself for not having gotten it into shape. And those esoteric passion projects that you keep pushing back, they're not just indulgences. They are the ones that will actually shape who you are as an artist. So you got to use them to check it on yourself, and that's vital. And I'll talk a bit more about that later. So the lessons here are that discipline matters. You have to put your ass in the chair. Let the work be terrible, but do get it done. Even if you hate it right now, it's just a phase, and you'll likely learn to love it again. It's what happens with every single project. And finishing things is one of those skills that will set you apart and will make people want to work with you. And the momentum, and I get that's really tiring, and there are lots of pressures on your time, but the momentum finishing works create does actually give you more energy to create more. The next mistake I made was I turned down my big break initially. This is a still from Murdered by My Father, which is a one-off drama I wrote for the BBC that broadcast in 2016. It won a Royal Television Society Award for Best Single Drama and was nominated for 3 BAFTAs, with the wonderful Adil Akhtar winning Best Actor, beating Benedict Cumberbatch, in fact, which will always be satisfying to me. And I don't say those things to brag. I say them because I turned this project down flat when it came in, right? And so none of those things would have happened if I'd stuck to that. And what happened there was basically my agent sent me an email about some producers looking to make a drama about honor violence. I'd drawn up a list of things I didn't want to make work about, and honor violence was on that list. So I said a straight no and got on with my life. But my agent is smarter than me and suggested that I should at least consider the meeting. And that wasn't her telling me to do something that I didn't want to do. It was more that this project was in the early stages of conception, so it could still be shaped. And she also reminded me that this was an area I talked about and was interested in, even though it was on my no list. So I took the meeting and I was clear about my fears in my message to them beforehand. I was worried that the approach would be schlocky, ripped from the headlines, that the title, which was fixed, would give that impression. And I was worried that this project would enforce a racial stereotype that I didn't want to perpetuate for the sake of a producer's ego. So it was astonishing to me to learn that the producer wasn't a terrible person. They weren't a headline grabber. Firstly, she was from the community we were looking to depict. Secondly, she'd been working with honor violence charities for years, and this project was something they were looking to do for the sake of awareness and not shock. And thirdly, she shared every single concern I did and asked me how I wanted to address it. And what resulted from that is we ended up having a really fulfilling working relationship where I was never shy about voicing my concerns. She always listened, even when she disagreed. And to be clear, she was an experienced producer of many years and a lot of renown. And I literally did not have a broadcast credit to my name at this point. So she didn't have to give me that consideration, but she did. And I was given the leeway to tell the story with the depth and the nuance I knew it demanded. And subsequently, Murdered by My Father went from a project I never wanted to do to one of the pieces of work I'm most proud of. And I guess what I learned from that is that to examine your prejudices about what the certain type of work that you don't want to do are and where they're really coming from. Are you avoiding them for reasons that can be solved, or is it just not what you want to put out into the world, which is entirely valid? Just try to look at projects in the fullness of what you could do with them. Although that can be an issue. I'll come back to that later as well. I also learned that, I think this is the fundamental thing about making anything creative with other people, was that it really, really matters who you work with. Like, you can have uncertainty, you can have execs you don't entirely click with, but both of those things, are common and inevitable, but the combination together is not where you want to be. So my positive experience there of taking on something tricky that I'd run away from initially was I was less scared a year and a bit later when I was asking, hey, can we do a Doctor Who episode about the partition of India? And that work was still hard, and there are a lot of stakeholders who you need to be mindful of, but I trusted the people I was working with to not throw me or the topic under the bus. Next, okay, taking on too much. If you get some degree of success, then you'll get a lot thrown at you quite quickly. This happened to me after Murdered by My Father was announced. Some of those offers were ridiculous. Some of them were interesting, but there'll be a few instincts inside you in response to that attention. And for me, it was like, I need to be grateful for these offers. I need to be a good boy. I owe people my time because I'm nobody. I've had all of those thoughts and feelings, and none of them are true. Like, you have to remember that you don't owe anyone anything. I didn't understand that, and I pissed a lot of people off, including myself, by trying to do what I thought was the right thing. So say no, it's okay. They'll more than likely come back to you another time if you just keep doing what you need to be doing. The slight caveat here is that you never know how much is too much until you hit your limit. And realistically, the only way you'll develop the capacity to do more is to try and push yourself a little beyond what you think you can do. So we will all at some point be taking on too much. I would just advise you to be very conscious of that process rather than just letting it all pile in. For me personally, it helps when there's a mix of projects in different stages. Like taking on 3 projects with lots of historical research all at once will really mess you and me up. But if like one's a sci-fi or one's a comedy and one's the heavy research one, I find that more doable. So don't be blasé about it. Build your slate of projects slowly and make sure you really want to do them. Which brings me on to doing a job for the wrong reasons. So prestige, money, ambition, collecting the right projects and being seen to be working on the right things. I've taken things on for all of these reasons, and more often than not, it's ended absolutely disastrously. You have to try and not be seduced by your capability if you think you can manage it. Projects take years to make, and saying to yourself, "Oh, it's cool, I can do something here and just move on." It's not enough to sustain you when it gets really difficult. You do have to find something in yourself that's personally invested in the project on an emotional or intellectual level in order to keep yourself in it and to deliver the work that everyone, including you, deserves. There can be, it's not always that's for a vain or terrible reason. There can be really benign reasons for that happening. Like one reason you'll end up doing a project you're not sure about is related to what I just spoke about a little bit earlier. You found someone you like working with and you don't want to let them down. And all I can say is turning stuff down if it doesn't click with you is the one legitimate way to disappoint people, and you should do it all the time. Like, they've got plenty on anyway, and they'll get over it. But they can be very good at pushing you into things without you noticing. Like I once ended up in a pitch meeting at Channel 4, I think it was, that I was told was like an initial hello, and I didn't realize it was actually a pitch meeting. And I've never felt so dumb as I sat there saying things that were literally being created for the first time as they fell out of my mouth. And all because I let someone I liked get excited about something I wasn't excited about. So, you're looking to work in this field because following your areas of interest is important to you. If you just want to make money and hate yourself doing it, you can still become an accountant. Next. Okay, rushing things. So this is kind of related to taking on too much, and that can be the reason you end up rushing a project. But it can also be a fear of disappointing people by not hitting a deadline. It can be procrastinating heavily and panic typing long into the night. Look, I get that. Just because you're not writing doesn't mean you're not working. Your brain is always mulling away at things. So sometimes that final rush can be, terrible for your waistline and your stress levels, but it's very productive and brilliant. But more often than not, that's not the case, and you can't rely on that. Mostly your writing will be better when it's a process of layering over time, writing, testing, writing again, repeat. That's how you get real depth and introspection into your work. And what I learned from my rushing, and I have rushed a lot when I first started out especially, is that one part of it is I just had to get better at managing my time on a personal level. I never really had to do that before. And this was, that was a fundamental part to being successful creative, especially if you want to do more than 1 or 2 projects at a time. I think maybe more importantly, though, I've also gotten better at being realistic about starting dates or how long projects will take. I used to be terrified at saying something would take longer than the person would like, or saying I couldn't start for a while because I'm too busy, when really we'd all be better off for me being upfront about that stuff. If you're not, you'll get stressed, they'll get stressed, and the work will be poorer for it. It's not indulgent to go, actually, this will take me longer than I thought to truly nail it. But do make sure you're actually using your time rather than as a way of kicking it down the road, only to rush to finish it again later. Like, that's just extending the problem rather than dealing with it. So this is not letting my agent be an agent. So I know this is something you don't have to worry about right now, but hopefully one day it will be. I was really scared about using my agent properly for years. I think maybe because I find them generally quite terrifying myself. And also just because I came up via the theatre fringe, as I've said. And that's a space where you get very quickly used to doing a lot of things for yourself, including a lot of negotiating. So when I got into my first early jobs in telly, I would keep quiet about a lot of things that troubled me, or assumed actually terrible things were normal, or I tried to convince myself I should keep on with something that was making me unhappy because that's just what the job was and I should suck it up. And even if I did say something, I thought, it is that's what I should be. I should be the one saying something. It's professional to have really shit and difficult conversations. And again, I should suck it up. But what you have to understand is agents are like the benign Karens of the art world. Like, they were born to speak to the manager. They absolutely love it, and they'll do it on your behalf. If you think you can handle those conversations, great. But I would suggest you rely on people who are better at it than you and have made a career out of it. Also, like, those conversations can be really messy, and going via a third party can take the heat and feeling out of difficult interactions. And I think it's important to do that because this industry is so heavily built on interpersonal connections, and that can fool you into thinking every bit of communication is best handled on the level of a couple of mates having a chat and drink, when that's not always true. While I'm here, let me just implore you to. I think it can be really easy to get wrapped up in the romanticism of big agents and seeing that as a career path, but I would really urge you to go with smaller agencies if you can, and agents who like you, rather than thinking the best route is to go with the big agencies. Because I know, like with a lot of my friends who are just starting out, they got signed by a big agency and were very excited by it, but they just sat at the bottom of a busy agent's pile, and they had no incentive to promote them above their more prestigious clients. So, look to smaller agencies, look to agents' assistants in particular, who are just starting to build their own books, because they'll be the people who will really back you. And like my agent, when I signed with her, I think she just gone from being an assistant to being an agent, and like she ended up flyering my one-man show in Edinburgh, which, if anyone who's done that knows, it's a thankless task. And I'm still with her today because I know how much she cares about what I'm doing. And finally, a final mistake is not checking in with my ambitions. So this photo is me at 22, I think. And there's that kid next to me. He was the lead actor. That's me directing my second short film. And I was sure the next one would be around the corner and directing would be my life. What happened next is, I'll just say that kid in that photo is graduating university this year and has gotten really into DJing and electro mixes. I, meanwhile, have not made another short film. So the last thing I want to impress on you is that these things don't just happen. Even when all seems to be headed the right way, you still need to think about what your ambitions actually are. And you should consider making a plan with small steps towards those goals and make sure you're always driving towards it. And that can help make it seem manageable, even when all seems very daunting. When I was younger, I had a document where every day I filled in something I did towards my short-term goal and towards a long-term goal. And that was really helpful at keeping me on track and motivated. You might not need to do that, but I did find that really helpful. And, of course, your life will find different directions like mine did. I've heavily ended up in the writing and I'm grateful for it. But it's important to check in with yourself about what you're truly hoping to do, because it's also easy to just drift, and you can have years where you just end up doing that. And that's basically it. I mean, I'll finish by saying I still make all of these mistakes all of the time, and you probably will too, even as you get down the line. But being conscious of them and understanding the learning they give you will make them at least productive and not devastatingly destructive. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Vinay. That was excellent. Having been through film school myself, yeah, a lot of what you were talking about there certainly rang true to me. And yeah, great advice for kind of young filmmakers, storytellers coming through the ranks there. There were a number of things there in your presentation that I thought were really interesting, a number of things to pick up on. But I want to start at the beginning and ask you, what drives you as a writer? Why are you a storyteller?
So the connection is a little bit fuzzy, but I think the question was, what drives me as a storyteller?
Yes.
Right? Okay. So, I mean, there are a couple of things. I think, there are so many motivations that make you push towards making art. It can be anything as noble as, here's a story that I think the world really needs to hear. And it can be as base as, I really want to impress that person so that they fancy me. I think, when I was starting out, it was more, I just liked telling stories, and that was really fun. And, when I was a kid writing stories on my kitchen table, that was definitely it. And then as I got a bit older, like, you find that there are things in the world that catch you as important to you as you wouldn't have expected to. So I always tell this story about how when I was up in Edinburgh for that, with that first play, there was a brown man on that poster. He's a central character, made a lot of sense. But I realized, looking around the Fringe, he was the only brown guy on a poster at the Fringe. And well, there was one other guy in Siddhartha the musical, but that was like a browned up Italian man. So like, I don't count that. And I looked at that, and I just remember like thinking about that play, which, is like, it's not the most amazing play in the world. It was like deeply felt and was everything I wanted to say in the world at the time, but I was still developing as an artist. But it was that poster that really stuck with me. And I realized that there was a thing in me going, I really want some mainstream minority stories. Like, that is something that sits in me, which I didn't clock before. I used to be, again, I tell the story of when I was doing my MA, I'd say, I want to do like plays about being a British Asian, but I want to do normal stories as well. And then as soon as that thought came into my head, I was like, what the fuck am I talking about? Like my life and the life of people I know are normal stories, but it's so easy to be trained to thinking that's like siloed off in a corner somewhere. So I went from thinking, I want to do fun mainstream work, to going, actually, I can reconcile the parts of my identity that cares deeply about those stories, but also with creating mainstream work. I also think I am interested in work that is the nexus of a conversation. Like, it's not the entire conversation itself. I think maybe this is, again, just what theatre does to you, is that I don't want the play to be giving you all the answers for something, but I do want it to be a site of discussion, and like a generous one, something that is fair to as wide an audience as possible, as well as, still advocating the things that I want, but I want those stories to be really humane, and I want them to be connective, and I want them to be humane. Yeah.
Good. I can see there are questions coming in from the audience, but I'm going to be really kind of greedy and monopolize you while I'm in this privileged position, and I'll ask you one more of my questions, and then we'll look at the chat and see what's coming through from the audience. So my next question is, and it is something that's pertinent to young storytellers, writers, directors coming through, is when did you, because you were trained as a writer for television and film, but you started your career in theatre. I'm wondering, is that a strategic decision you made?
No, I see people who talk about it as that, and I can see especially the way the industry is developed, because that why you might do that. Like, I know there is almost this this fetishization of like playwrights in the television industry in a way here that like maybe doesn't exist in America. I do kind of think that's a bit of a shame, because while inevitably, like having theatre is a good place to have a voice, and that distinctiveness is something that people on television really like. But for me, what it really was I'd had no real exposure with theatre before. Like, all the people at uni who were into theatre were like all the dickheads, basically, which I later realized was passion. But I had no interest in it until on that course, I met lots of people who'd done theatre before who were really interested in it. I'd learned some more about it. And so you have to write a long piece at the end of that MA. And I thought I was going to write a film, like, no question. Like, that made a lot of sense. But it's something about the community of theatre that I think is the more important thing. Like, I'm sure you'll understand this and have this in your own experience, Kolton, is like film and telly can be, it's a temporary community a lot of the time. Like, you come and you make a project and you disappear, whereas the lag time with theatre is so much longer. Rehearsals take longer. You sit with a show has a run, and it's quite easy to make. Like, I had a year where I wrote 12 short plays, and each time I try and push myself to do something new in it. And those went all to scratch nights, and the scratch night costs like almost nothing to put up, and you can play with an idea So in that way, it is a good place to develop, but I would be wary about that being a way of getting into television, especially as like my experience, the more I write for television, the more I want to go back and write for theatre, because it can be a really frustrating place, and getting sort of hooked on the purity of theatre can lead you into trouble in telly. But like, so it is that difficult thing of like, obviously it's a good place to develop work that will eventually make it to television, but it's too badly paid and too intense to not do it unless you really do like it or are interested in liking it.
Right. Good. Okay. I'm going to take a question from the audience now. The first one is, how do you deal with criticism of your work?
I've written a long blog about this, which is on the top, pinned to the top of my Twitter feed. Fundamentally, I guess, like the way to, like, I mean, the first answer, I guess, is like, especially with starting out, was like quite badly, because it's a really intense thing to be reviewed for the first time, right? And especially as you've lived with a project for years, and someone criticizing it lived with it for hopefully the entire length of time that it's on, but maybe not even that. You know, they might switch off in their brain. They might have been in a bad mood coming into, like, you just can't control other people's reactions, even though I think a big part of being an artist is you really want to control how other people feel about things. Like, so you can't rely on the metric of a show or a TV series or a film being successful if it's got the reviews that you would like to see of it, because you'll have good reviews which totally miss the mark as well, but you won't complain about those. So the only truthful and useful metric for criticism is, have you made the show that you wanted to make? Can you honestly look at it and go, yeah, that's everything I wanted to do with it? And if you can, I think that's the only critique you should live with. Like, if there are people you respect, and like I like engaging with good criticism, like even if it doesn't like the show, criticism that's considered. Yeah, sorry, that's a long way around of saying you've just got to rely on what you're trying to do. You don't have to be antagonistic towards critics or criticism because of that. You just know that some people always dislike your work. And like, I was just saying, sorry, before we get started, that like, when you do something like an episode of Doctor Who, you can guarantee that like at least 1 million people will hate that episode, right? Like, that's a lot of people to hate something you make, and you can't do anything about it. So you just have to go, do I think I did a good job? Like, I'm never going to convince those people. So don't let yourself be reeled in too much by the bad stuff or the good stuff either. But yeah, the blog I've written, which is on the top of my Twitter feed, is like a longer rundown on how to deal with criticism, especially as you're just starting out. Because I never, no one gave me that. I didn't know how to deal with it, and I think I wanted to create something that's useful. So do have a look at that if you're interested.
Right. Good. Thank you. Another question that's come through from the audience is, what skills do you think will be most applicable to our current students and graduates?
I think what you really need to have is flexibility and curiosity, really. Like, the world and the medium changes so fast that being too fixed or dedicating yourself too heavily to something can be a bit of a trap. Like when I was saying I directed that short film, 12 years ago. Like, I'm 34 now. It was like 12 years ago. The equipment has changed. I was a technician, right? So I knew everything about all of that equipment. I knew all about workflows. I knew how to go to the camera, onto the computer, and back off again. Now I know absolutely nothing about that, right? Because I didn't make the time to look into it and keep on top of those things. So I think it is not just relying on what you're doing. It is engaging with the advances in the field, and that can be creatively as well. Like, I know that when I started out, I made sure I was looking at different mediums apart from the ones I was interested in. So I got really into comic books briefly. I got really more heavily into theatre. I started looking at the type of films that I wouldn't normally, just because I thought, right, this is this is the best way to expand my mind as an artist. I think Kolton has disappeared. So I'm going to pick it up by looking at a question in the chat here, which is, how did I go about sourcing an agent? So first of all, I'd say, like, think about whether you really need one. Like, an agent in and of itself won't do everything for you. Like in my case, my agents looked at the showcase that the theatre company that I was working with was creating and asked if they had full-length scripts of those things yet. I had that one play, and they went and read it, and they liked it. And luckily, I liked them and went from there. That might happen for you, but it probably won't. I would say what you want to do is, I'm sorry, very quickly. Sorry, I have to say this. Having an agent at that point wasn't actually very useful for me because I wasn't really ready to move properly into television in particular yet, and I wasn't really productive enough to create the work to pitch too much. But they will. You want to find, as I said before, you want to find someone who you engage with and get on board with, and they will have patience with you as you develop your portfolio before you're actually useful to them as a client. But in terms of sourcing, I think what you need to do is look at people who you like. Look at, it's the same way you find producers. Like, look at the work you like, look at who's making them, who represents the people who do the kind of things that you're doing or are looking to do, and get in touch with them. I'd repeat that thing of make sure you aren't just considering the big agencies. Do look at smaller agencies, look at agents' assistants. They're the ones who are more likely to have more time to engage with you. If you have a play on, invite them, when you email them, don't just go, "Dear agent," research them a little bit, say why they might be interested in it. You'll get a much better cut through by engaging with the work that they're doing if you want them to engage with the work that you're doing. What else do we have here? Okay. How has lockdown affected your current work within the film and TV industry? Well, it's interesting. I've been slightly lucky, I guess, in that nothing I've been working on is imminently going into production. Like, I had a friend who was literally doing the first read through of the first episode of something that was about to shoot. And I find that, I imagine that's really gutting. Although she has also said that she's been able to use that time to make those scripts better. So I think, there is opportunity there. It's actually mostly affected my theatre stuff because theatre at the moment is really struggling. It can't start producing properly, and I don't know when my theatre stuff will go on. But with the telly stuff at the moment, I think because development is kind of the only thing everyone can do, a lot of writers are getting a lot of approaches from people they haven't heard from for a while going, "Hey, can we go back and look at that project, and can we work on that now because we can't focus anywhere else?" So I think there's going to be, perversely, writers right now have quite a lot to do, but in a few months' time, there'll be a real glut of work and a real backlog of production. So I think that's when it will really properly hit. Let's see what else. Whose work have I seen recently, which is really exciting? I'm really bad answering this. It'll be that thing I'll talk for saying I can't think of anything, and then I'll leave, and there'll be tons. I mean, I guess I'll do a shout out for that person whose show was shut down. So my friend Nida Mansour, who directed my second episode of Doctor Who, she's got a show called Lady Parts coming out, which I think is going to be really brilliant. It's a really fun TV show about an all-female Muslim punk band, and it's really fresh and it's really funny, and I can't wait for that to land in the world. And theatre-wise, is because that's where I sort of see a lot of new people starting out. It's just sort of anything at my like I get really excited about seeing the theatres that I came up through, who they're bringing through now, and I have inevitably forgotten all their names. Oh, hang on, sorry. I'll tell you who I'm really excited about if I can just get him to wait for it. Here it is. My cat is someone I'm really excited about. What have we got here? Who have I worked with who's blown me away? He's been favorite project. Honestly, like working with Adil completely blew me away, because I didn't think he'd, when we approached him for Murdered by My Father, we hadn't had a fully finished script yet. So it was me as like a newbie writer with him and his very intimidating agent going for lunch, and them asking, why should I do this project? And me going, I'll try. Like, I think you're really talented. I think you're really wonderful. You haven't had a chance to show all your range, and I think you'll be brilliant at this. And I promise I won't just make him this 2D character. I'll make someone with real depth and feeling that you can really drill into. And yeah, like he was very quiet and very intense. And I was like, oh no, like I've made him really angry. And he was kind of that at the read through as well. But then on the day itself, when during shooting, like he just goes into the moment and he's there so completely. And then once it's done, he's out of it again. It's really nice. Like, he's not a total arsehole. He doesn't have to live in it to make it all work. And he's just really compelling and also really nice. And I think basically anyone who's phenomenal at what they do and still a nice person really blows me away, just because like the industry is so good at making you think that only dickheads do good work. And that's just fundamentally not true. And you should never either believe it or perpetuate that.
I am indeed back. There's a few questions that have come through from the audience. I'm gonna read one out. Hopefully you won't have answered this one yet. Where are we? Sorry. It was to do with the coronavirus and how you think that's affected the industry.
I've done that one. That's okay. Yep.
Okay.
I did that one. You worked with, that's exciting and blown you away.
Okay. Well, a question I've got is, you talked earlier about having your passion projects on the side whilst you're doing your commissioned work. Do you have any passion projects that are on the side?
Yeah, I'm working on a play that's about the making of Star Wars and sort of the 1970s filmmaking scene. And I've sort of been researching that for a few years, and now I'm writing it properly. And it does keep getting kicked back, unfortunately, especially because it's a play. But I'm really excited about it, because it is the project that will sort of pivot me as a writer a little bit. And also it's something I've been really fascinated in for years. And I have to be really strict to myself to go, I do really love it. And I've gotten too used to doing the work that I have to do because I'm made to do it, and I need to get back to it.
Right. Good. Okay. And another question, I mean, you said this is a project that will pivot you. What do you mean by that?
In that, like, it's kind of funnier than what I've done before. It's a larger cast. It's kind of more ambitious in terms of its storytelling and its size generally. And that's the kind of stuff, the reason I said I did a one-man play to start with was because it was the cheapest thing I can do. And that can affect the way your dramaturgy, the sort of the way you conceive of stories. And so what's been nice about this was going, actually, I can think on a really big scale, and that's fine. My cat's name is Chillcat. I've realized that as a question in the chat. He's a very friendly boy.
Good. I'm glad we know that. We're running out of time. We've probably got time for maybe a couple more questions. One I wanted to ask, and I don't know whether you've answered this while I was offline, but you mentioned in your presentation at the beginning about not clinging, but hanging on to the things that sort of motivate you. And you direct the film, you hadn't directed. How important is it you direct your own work?
I think I'd love to direct the stuff that's that really truly that I can see very clearly. I think there are stories that you write that I'm interested in the drum and the characters and the stuff that I can actually see the shots and I can see the movement of it and I can feel the tone of it. I'm like, I need to do that, otherwise I will hate myself. I'm conscious we have to wrap up, and I have to like a final message for the audience, though.
Yes, please.
So I guess my final message for you is like, you just keep on keep on doing the work, but also just like particularly right now, if you do have to step back for a little bit and just do the things that make you and your family feel safe, that's absolutely fine. Like, you'll have so much time to keep going, and your experiences right now will only feed into the work you make. Like, I think it's really easy to get caught up, especially when you're young, especially when you're starting out, and the idea that it is this mad rush, and if you don't do it now, you'll be a failure. And like, that's never been true, and it's definitely not true right now. So don't put that pressure on yourself.
Vinay Patel, thank you very much. Really appreciate you taking the time to come in. And a big thanks to the audience for being here and being a part of this event this evening. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, Vinay. Thank you. Christy, any closing remarks?
Yep, I want to say a big thank you to both Kolton, our host, and obviously Vinny, our guest speaker this evening. Some great points and questions from the audience. Thank you for attending. For any future events or workshops that Ravensbourne will be hosting, please have a look at our website. It is makeit.ravensbourne.ac.uk. You can see that link on your screen now. Thank you again for both of you, and we hope to see you at one of our future events.